Daniel is super confused. And so then this Holy One speaks and tells an angel, Gabriel, to interpret it for Daniel. And so we're going to read the interpretation together. Here we go. Let's start in verse 20. As for the ram you saw with the two horns, these are the kings of Media and Persia. And the goat is the king of Greece, and the great horn between his eyes is the first king. As for the horn that was broken, in place of which 4 others arose, 4 kingdoms shall arise from his nation, but not with his power. And at the latter end of the kingdom, when the transgressors have reached their limit, a king of bold face, one who understands riddles, shall arise. His power shall be great, but not by his own power, and he shall cause fearful destruction and shall succeed in what he does and destroy mighty men and the people who are the saints. By his cunning he shall make deceit prosper. Under his hand and in his own mind he shall become great. Without warning he shall destroy many, and he shall even rise up against the prince of princes, and he shall be broken, but by no human hand. The vision of the evenings and mornings that has been told is true, but seal up the vision, for it refers to many days from now. And then Daniel weighs in. And I, Daniel, was overcome and lay sick for some days. And then I arose and went about the king's business, but I was appalled by the vision, and I did not understand it. Isn't that so helpful? The person who not only gets the vision goes, I don't get it. Then an angel explains it to him. He goes, that's awesome. I don't get it. But what we have that Daniel did not have is the next 400 years of history to follow this vision. The insane reality is that this vision is historically spot on for the rise and fall of kingdoms and the way it will affect God's people over the next 400 years. It's crazy. Now, I know that some of you in here, you're not history buffs. That's okay. I need you to indulge me for just a minute, though. We've got to understand. For those of you who aren't history buffs, though, I brought some props that I think will probably help. Okay. So at first what we see here is the ram who's standing by the water. And the ram, which is going to be the Medes and the Persians, this great empire, is going to be represented by our friend Mando here. This is the way. So Mando is hanging out by this water, and he represents the Persian Empire. And here's what's so historically wild about this vision that Daniel has. Daniel is living in Babylon at the time of Belshazzar around 550 BC. And what Daniel's seeing in this vision is that the Persians are going to come over to Babylon and destroy it. And they are going to reign supreme and take over as the predominant empire of the known world. And what's so insane is, guess what? This happens just 11 years later in 539 BC. We see that the Persians do in fact come over and take over the Babylonians. But then there's something else that's spoken. Then it says this great goat comes out of nowhere. And for our goat, we have Darth Vader himself. I looked for a Tom Brady action figure, but they were either unavailable or way too expensive, so we got Vader. All right. We're on a budget, guys. All right. So give. No, I'm just kidding. So Darth Vader. Sorry, some of you are like, no, I don't like that. So anyways, the Greeks come out of nowhere, and they come and they end up leveling the Persians. But this doesn't happen until almost 200 years after the vision. And what's so crazy is that potentially Daniel could have seen the Persians coming to take over Babylon. It wasn't a mystery that the Persians were powerful. What no one could have seen coming is the Greeks. The Greeks were this weird collection of city-states who were always at war with each other. They were always fighting in and amongst themselves. But what happened was the Persians went and tried to take over Greece, which didn't go really well. If you've ever seen the movie 300, the Greeks put up quite a fight. And so then what happens is the Persians kind of go back defeated, and they're like, we'll kind of leave Greece to their own thing. But what that developed with Greece was this hatred and frustration toward the Persians that just festered. And then 200 years after the Persians had taken over the Babylonians, out of nowhere, this king from Macedonia, the northern city-state of Greece, by the name of King Philip II, he unites Greece under one banner, and then he gives way to a son whose name is Alexander. And Alexander will be known as Alexander the Great, because by the age of 18, Alexander is already an unbelievable military leader. He has unbelievable military prowess. By the age of 20, Alexander the Great's father dies. And then Alexander takes over, and Alexander begins to conquer the known world. And this goat, this Greek king, comes in swiftly and destroys the Persian Empire and conquers most of the known world by the age of 33. And all of this will happen around 334 BC, 200 years after Daniel's vision. Wild, right? So this Greek king comes in and destroys. And here's the crazy thing. Then it says at the height of this goat's power, at the height of the king of Greece's power, that amazing horn is going to be broken and 4 others are going to spring out of its place. What happens to Alexander the Great? At the age of 33, I think he contracts like malaria or something and dies. And what happens? He's gone. So 4 generals, we know this to be historically true, 4 generals take over in his place. They rise up and they divide up the kingdom. And it wasn't Gambit and Wolverine and Magneto, but that's not the point. And I just jumped Disney IPs, and I know that's confusing for many of you, and I'm sorry. But look, so these 4, they come out of this one. They come out of the Greek Empire, and then there's one that's going to cause a lot of carnage. And this one comes out of the other 4, and this one is the king of Syria that we historically know to be Antiochus. And he labeled himself Theos Antiochus Epiphanes, meaning Antiochus, the illustrious God, right? I don't think that's a name anybody else gave him. That's the name you bestow upon yourself. And so he then rises to power in Syria, and what he does is he wreaks havoc on God's people. He travels over to the beautiful land. We represented this as Babylon, so let's go over here for the beautiful land. He goes to Jerusalem and he sacks Jerusalem. And then he takes over the temple and he does the most disgusting, vile things to the temple, the most insulting things to the Jewish people. He begins to sacrifice pigs on the altar. He has human sacrifices on the altar. He puts up a statue to Zeus in that place of worship. And ultimately what he's doing is something you can learn about in history we don't have time for here, called he's trying to Hellenize the Jews. He's trying to get God's people to bow to his culture. He slaughters over 100,000 of the Jews who didn't bow to his culture and he saw as potential threats. And he does crazy things like he doesn't allow the Jews to circumcise anymore. He forbids the Jews from practicing the Sabbath. He makes Jews eat pork. He is a horrific person who does some really vile things. And all of this happens nearly 400 years after this vision that was given to Daniel. How insane is this? It's so unbelievably historically accurate. We see all of these kingdoms and all of these empires and how it will affect God's people.